Hey everyone. Alright, so jumping right into it, one thing I immediately loved about this chapter is how when you see the Eden Zero face down with Feather's blockade, everyone immediately calls out the fact that if they hadn't taken this little detour to begin with, then they wouldn't even be in this situation. And while I personally maintain that they still end up having to deal with Feather and her armada in some capacity, whether they immediately booked it to Lendert or not, I still really love how we have everyone calling this out. More specifically, Laguna and Jin emphasizing the fact that they used their they wasted their fast travel. Like when you hear all the everyone voice their opinions on just how much of a shit show they got themselves into, the crew isn't exactly wrong either, because now even though they ultimately did escape, they just like, because when you really look at this whole chapter, even though they did escape, they just barely managed to get out of there by a split second and by basically the skin of the teeth. So it's one of those things where for as good as the intentions behind the act of helping Connor were, and for however much helping Connor does basically align with the crew's ultimate goal, it doesn't change the fact that the decisions that were made in themselves are kind of what got them into this mess with pretty much with pretty much with Feather and the Armada and whatnot. And as Homer also pointed out, in order to drive it home, she basically reminded the crew that they are at the top or near the top of the government's most dangerous criminals list. And now that Holy is basically tagging in for Feather, just kind of proves that point even further, as things on like, and just goes to show that things on Lendard are gonna become even more complicated. And I hate to say it, but I don't think Shiki even fully understands the consequences of what being considered one of the Iratian States Galactica means. So, in knowing that, I'm almost kind of thinking that whole idea in itself is going to be the basis of the next arc, like of the next character arc that Mashima has planned for Shiki right now. Is it's going to be this whole thing of understanding what being one of the Irrational States Galactica really means, because I don't think, because he seems to still kind of be treating it like any other thing. Like, no, being Irrational States Galactica means you're one of the most dangerous fucking criminals out there, Shiki, at least in the eyes of the government. Now, with all that being said, as Shiki pointed out at the end of the chapter, and Connor proved throughout, like, Connor's officially the captain, or technically the pilot of the ship now, which, yeah, Connor's style of maneuverability and flying in order to evade the Armada was fucking psychotic. Like, seriously, for as amazing as Connor's skills as a pilot are in this chapter, I was kind of on the same I was kind of on the same wavelength as everyone else in this chapter. Like, are you fucking insane? What the fuck are you doing? You're gonna get everyone killed? Like seriously, the kind of shit Connor pulled in this chapter, for as epic as it was, made me worried the ship was probably gonna burst into flames like before they even properly escaped. But again, credit where it's due. Like, this whole chapter for me is an example of something I don't think Mashima gets enough credit for, even when it comes to Eden Zero specifically, which is how he conducts aerial space combat. Like, how he structures like these kind of, like, I don't know if you could call them fights, but just like these very active, these very complex, these very complex space travel maneuvers and whatnot, and just fights in space in general. What he does whenever the crew's in space is just so dynamic and packed with so much energy that you can almost argue that the space battles are kind of one of the main reasons he wanted to do Eden Zero. Is he had some creative ideas on how to draw these really epic large space battles, while in context of this chapter, also showing us the untapped capabilities of space travel in this world if you're resourceful enough. Like it's one of those things where I wouldn't be surprised if like Mashima had these ideas in his head of how to conduct a space battle. So he said, I'm just gonna make a series around it almost. Like I wouldn't put it past the guy. And also yeah, let's and obviously yeah, like just from what Connor does in this chapter with how he uses like all the ship systems in order to maneuver around the fleet, it does tap into the idea of aspects of space from space from just from just from space from space from space from space from space from space maneuverability we haven't even touched on yet. Also, yeah, let's talk about the obligatory racer cameo in this chapter, because for me, honestly, I've always thought Mashima has done pretty well at making certain characters distinct, even when they do look similar to other characters he's created. So, but I do have to admit, to me, it was just in order to see this chapter, Mashima just kind of plops Racer from Fairy Tail's Arashi Seis into the chapter. It was a little hilariously jarring how much he stuck out. Like, again, Mashima's been good at kind of like disguising a lot of the Fairy Tail elements in some way. Like Elsie obviously being the one exception to that, but like he's always been good at disguising the elements that are so obviously Fairy Tail that when he just plops Racer in, I'm like, okay, we got Racer in space. Like that's all I could think of. Like, yeah, that's the one time you went a little too Fairy Tail with that. I'm sorry. Also, so one thing I have to give Mashima credit for too is that during this chapter when Feathers showed up, and was chasing down the Eden Zero, he still ended up reinforcing the idea that yes, for as powerful as Feathers' Eye of God is, the point of it sounding OP, there is still a fair amount of restrictions and limitations that can be exploited in order to overcome it, to the point where I do have to admit I did question what worth it is in combat, but when reading this chapter, but the more I thought about it, the more I think Mashima was just trying to convey that uncontrolled space combat is definitely one of the ability's weaknesses, and where it's probably at its weakest. And yeah, getting back to Holy, with the crew basically headed full steam back to K-Day Cosmos, it's definitely going to be an out of the frying pan into the fire situation, because the way Holy was talking in that last panel, you can tell she's already fully prepared for their like arrival or re-entry into the K-Day Cosmos. And honestly, right now all I can hope for is that the crew is ready and has learned enough from past mistakes, not to just rush in next time, because between Holy and Ziggy, shit is going to hit the fan fast, and they need to be as prepared as they can for what's to come. Now, one thing that does also beg the question in my mind is how Connor seemingly knew the best way to counter her Eye of Feather's Eye of God. Like, maybe I'm overthinking it, but the fact that his maneuver with the asteroids even worked is a little suspicious to me. So it's one of those things where I think Mashima is intentionally keeping suspicion on Connor for some reason, because for as epic as Connor was in this chapter, honestly, a lot of what happened with him in this chapter only left me with more questions than answers about the man himself. And yeah, but as a whole, if I were to properly describe, as a whole, I think this pretty much marks the end of this little mini arc. And honestly, as a whole, it definitely felt a lot like a detour, frankly. But and there were things I wish were touched upon that we didn't even touch upon in this arc. But now that we're it did still somewhat serve its purpose, I think. And now that we are moving on, hopefully we're gonna go full steam ahead into craziness now. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, AnalystControl. Be sure to hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight for me, signing off. Later, everyone.